Today on Independent Wrestling Profiles, we're talking with pretty F'N Dope PD Skillz. So, when did you first discover professional wrestling?
I wish I could tell you when I first discovered professional wrestling because I've just always known it to be around. Like my dad was a fan.
And was it just like a regular thing you would tune in weekly with your dad or whatever?
Yeah, my dad would watch it as regularly as possible on like the channels, and obviously like I have memories of me starting to watch it, and then somewhere in like I'd say somewhere around the around the new generation when Brett and Sean had really started getting popular. That's when I have memories of me really starting to take off with my own fandom, and like obviously we all have like faint memories of the Hulk Hogan era and all that, but we were still young, like real young. And while I do have like the faintest memories of that, the stuff that sticks really is like, when Brett and Sean really got going.
Yeah, and I think it ebbs and flows for people. I know me personally, when I saw the like rock and wrestling era, it didn't grip me, and I fell out of it until the Attitude Era, and that's when I was just like, oh no, okay, now it's connecting with me. But did you kind of have a period of time where it was like you kind of fell out of it, or maybe you were, social pressure, it was not cool to like wrestling? Like, was it a constant thing in your life?
Constant since I was a little kid. You look in like my grade eight like yearbook that they do, because the first year I got like a yearbook. There's wrestling comments in it. All my high school yearbooks, wrestling comments in it. Like I never shied away from professional wrestling. There's much sillier, like there's much. I mean, wrestling's silly as all hell, but like there's much sillier things on this planet than professional wrestling to be ashamed of. Like why? I am not ashamed of my super action soap opera. Like who cares? I never shied away.
Was there any performers that particularly appealed to you that helped you kind of guide along your fandom, or maybe even worked as inspirations towards you wanting to get involved with it?
Like obviously, as pointing them out as pillars of the era that really, my earliest memories go back to Brett and Sean, big influences as far as my fandom and as far as my professional wrestling. And then, like obviously I do the deathmatch stuff I do. You gotta throw Mick Foley in there, Terry Funk in there. Like these are all guys. Like Terry Funk is someone I grew up more liking for the older I got and the more pro wrestling tape that was available to me. But like Mick Foley early on was one of the hardcore guys that I liked. How could you like growing up? How could you not like Jeff Hardy, like Matt Hardy, like all everybody involved in TLC, the ECW guys? Like that was all a big influence on me.
Okay, so take me through some of your first experiences of attempting wrestling yourself. How did you actually start to take the path towards professional wrestling?
Oh God, I mean, if there's a version of wrestling that exists from childhood to adulthood, I've done it. Whether it was, dropping pile drivers on your stuffed animals, to making cardboard belts and beating the trash out of your brothers because you don't know it's a work yet, or you kind of know it's a work, but you're not really sure. So you're just laying that sharpshooter in on your brother, saying like, "I'm the champ this week, buddy," and then older brother immediately gets a rematch clause. I went from that to, amateur wrestling in high school, backyard wrestling with my friends, all the way up until training for professional wrestling. Like any step in between, I've done it, whether it's been on a trampoline, on a tarp, a boxing ring, a wrestling ring, a living room, like everything.
So I don't want to feed into the stigma, but I do want to address it. Some people will get a little bit elitist when it comes to paths towards wrestling, and they might even look down at backyard wrestling. Can you kind of take me through your feelings towards backyard wrestling as an avenue, and maybe what sort of valuable skills you learned in that were able to carry over when you got into official training?
I mean, one of it is the trust thing. I mean, especially at that level, with minimal training, you rely a lot on the trust portion. So there is that. You do learn the brotherhood portion. There's so many of the values that go deep down to it. Because as much as people want to give backyard wrestling a bad rap, like these are all kids that all they want to do is be professional wrestlers. So, I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, it gets a bad rap, but like, I would never even tell someone to stray away from it. Well, I always say be careful, yeah, but I mean, let kids be kids. There's worse things on the planet than backyard wrestling. There's a lot of people who, say, oh, like, and I get it. If some That's all somebody did, and then, or they're trying to present themselves as a professional wrestler or make money off of backyard wrestling. I mean, there's always a different line for everybody, and I get that. But for me, I'm like, let kids be kids. There's much worse things. I like as someone who's been doing this 20 years, doing professional wrestling and then doing backyard before that, and doing, like amateur wrestling in high school before that and whatever, I've hurt myself way more in other things than I have wrestling. Like, let kids be kids.
So before we move on from that, is there any particular highlights from your backyard wrestling days or any particular, let's say, moves or personality traits that you carried with you moving forward after that?
A lot of it went so like when I was younger, I always loved being the bad guy. I love being the heel. So a lot of my characteristics, like when I was younger, I used to wrestle as a persona that was kid perfect, very egotistical, very cocky character. But I also like to get dirty and do the hardcore matches, similar to what I do now. And I find when I lean into a heel persona, I do reach in the bag and grab a lot of what I would call, young Tim. I do grab a lot of that out of the bag when it comes to, taking an influence from what I did then and doing it now and applying it now. And when some of my friends from back then see me wrestle now as a heel, they're like, that motherfucker. Like, I know that guy.
So take me through the transition to that next step. How do you go from amateur wrestling in school, backyard wrestling with your friends, to actually taking, we'll say proper, for lack of a better phrase, proper wrestling training?
I mean, like pro wrestling training, proper wrestling training. No, that's a great way to put it. Honestly, it was just the steady interest. And then, like in high school wrestling, yeah, I was doing high school wrestling, but is that the wrestling I saw on TV and I thought was cool? No, but it was the closest thing I was getting at that point. And then while I was actually in amateur wrestling, is when I had literally just overheard people like in the corner literally talking about backyard wrestling. So, then after practices, asking those people the follow-up questions like, hey, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And I mean, when I was younger, we're all ignorant. And when we're younger, like the people that I backyard wrestled with, they all like were in tight with the local indie fed and would set up the ring and everything for them and were the ring crews. So like my ignorant ass thought it was the path to professional wrestling at the point. So I was like, yeah, I got to get in on this backyard wrestling stuff. And then obviously I smartened up during that time frame, like as I got older and realized what it really was. But I mean, it was fun and I loved it. And it just seemed like the best thing to do with my time until I could do it on an independent level.
Okay, so take me through kind of the early days of transitioning to independent wrestling. How did you get started on wrestling for these federations rather than the backyards? How did you find the transition? Was there any pain points of adjusting your style to more what you would see in like an independent wrestling venue?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if there's anybody who, yeah, listens to this that does backyard wrestling and wants to be a professional wrestler one day, you eventually have to realize you're starting fresh and that you know nothing, or at least you need to take that approach. Even if you know a thing or two, you got to take that approach because honestly, it's what's best is that fresh start and learning from there. Um, like myself, I'd always been around it and always tried to get in backstage at shows and all that. So I was always close with people. And the first indie promotion that I got booked for was, people I knew that had started their own company fresh, like that I knew from when I was younger that were out of town. And, that was kind of my first in. But, I had just always been around it and always tried to keep myself around it. So when I was ready to go to the next step, it just kind of seemed always there.
So I do like to explore that first match experience. Do you remember who that match was against, how you felt about it when you were done, and maybe even some of the feedback or crowd reaction you got?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started professional wrestling, I started in a company called PWX. This was back in 2004. My first match was against a guy named Predator, who I actually knew from back in the day backyarding. Like we had both went to different places, like we had both seeked out training at, different schools at the time. And but we knew each other from like because backyard wrestling was so big in my city that people traveled. There was people that traveled to my city from the United States. There's people that traveled from out in BC to come backyard wrestle in Windsor, and so this I he was another person that came up in some of those backyard circuits, and we did a bunch of stuff. Like my first professional wrestling match, I laugh because I say, you did it wrong when your first professional wrestling match, you're taking unprotected headshots with chairs, and that's exactly one of the many things I did. Like, you have no one should be having a hardcore match in their first professional wrestling match, and it's kind of what ended up happening with me because like the promoters knew from back in the day that I would do that kind of stuff, so they just figured, tap together Tim as PD Skillz with the professional wrestling training now on top of his already, stupid history. And I landed myself in a match. Like I said, you shouldn't really be doing for your first match. And I always tell people now, like, get your fundamentals down and, learn how to work a crowd, learn how to entertain without all that before you start trying to do that on the regular because doing it backwards sucks. I feel like I was constantly in a learning state until I dropped all that and learned how to, really slowed it down and learned how to get the same reaction out of throwing a punch as I was throwing a chair.
Well, obviously, hardcore wrestling, backyard wrestling is something that stayed with you throughout your entire career. I mean, I know I've watched some crazy matches with you in my area here, PWO, a lot of blood, a lot of punishment, we'll say, to the body. How do you prepare yourself for a hardcore slash death match versus just a standard match? How do you get yourself in the mentality of there's a very high likelihood that I'm going to get pretty hurt now?
Well, I mean, a lot of it was just, building up that tolerance over time and learning what can I get away with. And, your the natural human instinct to push those limits and see how far you can go. But as far as the preparation goes, I mean, aside from apologizing to my girlfriend and my kids in advance that I'm going to look a mess for a little bit, honestly, not much because it's the same amount of preparation, the same amount of planning, the same amount of talking. And it's just, I don't even know if it sounds cliche at this point, but like when the lights are on and the music hits, like I'm a different person. So I don't really prepare for it. I just become it.
So it's more of an in the moment thing because I know for me, if I'm gonna risk getting cut, my natural instinct is to pull away from it, not dive headfirst into it.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that's what I say. It's when the music hits and the lights are on, like my girlfriend will punch me and I'll be like, ow. And she's like, what do you mean, ow, big wrestler? I'm like, listen, if you're gonna punch me, you gotta play my theme music first.
So speaking into that whole becoming a new person, can you take me through kind of the origins of the PD Skillz persona, kind of how it evolved over time, what impression you wanted the audience to leave a venue with about you when they saw you compete?
Well, I mean, I wish it was that in depth, but it's not. So, like I said, I used to wrestle as Kid Perfect when I did backyard wrestling, and then eventually I wanted to stray away from that, obviously, and kind of shed that image. And um, floating around names, one of my buddies were like, "Oh, I always thought the name for a wrestler JC Skills would be cool." And I was trying to figure out like some sort of natural evolution from Kid Perfect at the time to this, and I was like, okay, so like I got to keep the P in there somehow, and started trying to think what initials will sound cool with Skills, and I landed on PD kind of, and then tried to force it to fit. I knew I wanted like kind of more of a hip hop image at the time, because I also started making rap music, and I was like, how can I lean into that a little bit? And it was like it was, and when I was training for pro wrestling, they started calling me Tim Stizzle because they knew I was a hip hop head and all that, and it just became like Perf Dizzle, like Kid Perfect was Perf, like, oh, it's Perf Dizzle, and that was the origin of it. And then when I started indie wrestling, I wanted to keep the PD Skills name, so I was like, you know what? I'm not doing what I did before, but like what's like what am I now? And I'm like, they say that the guy that the best character for you in wrestling is you on 10. I'm like, well, I'm just a pothead that likes watching wrestling and loves to wrestle. Like, I just like to smoke and scrap. And so that's what I landed on was kind of all right. I guess it's pot something. And uh in the early years it stood for the pot doctor. And in later years it would stay, I would kind of rebrand it as standing for pretty dope. So kind of similar to how, CM Punk, it was Chick Magnet, and then, he settled it into Chicago Made. It kind of evolved as time went on. Mine went, from Perf Dizzle to Pot Doctor to what it's known now, and that's pretty dope.
It's awesome. So I am talking to all of the members, but I'd like to hear in your own words how it came to be that you were a part of Airstrike, how that tandem came to be, how you got included, and maybe some of the highlights of working with those guys.
So Airstrike was a tag team before I had even met them. They had started as like their tag team, and I had met them at a few indie shows. More so Tyler Arrow when the pandemic hit is the first one of the two I became close with because we were doing like No Ring North, which was like a no ring wrestling product during the pandemic that had started doing, like tapings, like random farms, indoor skate parks, stuff like that. And then when the pandemic kind of lifted, and I had hung out around, companies at the time like Pro Wrestling Ontario, a company that was Courage Pro Wrestling back at the time, and I'd started to get to know Tyler Arrow and Mike Forte, a little bit better just through working with them. And back when everybody seemed to be doing a podcast, I mean, so was I during the pandemic when none of us really had a whole lot to do. I was doing the PD Skillz show. Shameless plug, they're still up to go check out on all streaming platforms, and I keep everything up on YouTube. And I did an episode with them one day, and that's where I really got to know them. It was over all platforms. It was my most listened to, most viewed podcast, and I really liked them. I always thought they had good attitudes. Um, I knew Tyler Arrow had that hardcore side to him that we bonded over. And honestly, as most great things happen in wrestling, it just kind of happened organically and by mistake. A bunch of different cancellations and circumstances happened one day on a show, and it just kind of made sense to tag with them. They had, because in PWO they don't have tag titles, they have trios titles, and they had been trios champions with somebody else before, and they did a split up angle and all that. And just on that night, is they had like it just seemed like the right night to throw the three of us together. It was the smartest thing to do in the situation. And at the end of the night, after we did it, we were just kind of like, "Oh, well, that was cool." Like I liked tagging with Airstrike, and I'd said to the promoters, "I'm like, yo, like I don't know, like if you had what the plans were in the future, but whatever the hell that was out there, like I could come back and do that all the time." And when they decided to roll with it and decided that we were the direction they kind of wanted to go in because they agreed, the crowd kind of dug it. We meshed together. It was, the two young guys with the old pothead, and it was its own thing. And I mean, a bunch of names were tossed around, but I know my gimmick isn't their gimmick. So like, I don't want to throw, I don't want to be, oh, guys, let's be Smoke Strike or, like something like that. And it came down to like, all right, like we're going to be doing this for a while. We're going to need a name, and different ones were tossed around. And I was just like, I know this is going to sound really simple, and like, but how about Airstrike XL? You throw me like, I'm the big guy in. You throw me in. Now it's Airstrike with another member. It's XL. It's extra large now. Like that's and it just kind of stuck. And when it came to like, oh, what do you want to do for music? I'm like, you guys are already coming out to boy band stuff. Let's keep it. No one would think I would come out to that. And over time we switched from what they used to our own trio song and started using I Want It That Way. And, we're getting the crowd singing and behind us. And honestly, the time that I've spent, like out of the 20 years that I've done professional wrestling, the time with Airstrike, like the times that I'm in the ring with Tyler Arrow, Mike Forte, doing the Airstrike XL, doing boy band shit, is the most fun I've ever had in professional wrestling. The most politic free, in the moment, just like unapologetic moments. that I love about pro wrestling, and that's it for me. Is like I say, sometimes is so I love deathmatch and I love getting bloody and I love all the gore, but sometimes I just want to do boy band shit with my friends.
So just to piggyback off that, you had mentioned, 20-year career, lots of fun, absolutely blast when you're with Airstrike. But what are some of the other highlights that would come to your mind immediately if I was to say milestone matches, fan interactions, just, chance encounters? What are some of the biggest highlights of your career if you were to just sit back and think on the last 20 years?
If I really wanted to sit and think about it, to be honest, I've got a great memory. I don't really have to in those cases because there's a lot of things I feel if I'm not like I'm very fortunate to have experienced as a fan and as a professional wrestler. Like early in my career, I got to like within my first couple of years of wrestling, I got to wrestle Greg the Hammer Valentine, and that was a name that like I grew up watching. And at the time, that was the coolest thing to me was wrestling Greg the Hammer Valentine. And I got to interact with the $1 million, like Ted DiBiase, the $1 million man. Got to interact with him. I've got pictures of me as a kid getting the $1 million dream, and pictures of me in the ring as a professional wrestler getting the $1 million dream. And Barbarian, that was another one that was cool to me. I got the honor of wrestling Luke Harper before he had passed. So Brody Lee, you know, that's a big one where he's in my age bracket. He means a lot to a lot of people in the Ontario area because he came over here a lot. Being from Buffalo. So Brody Lee was a cool one early on that I got and got the chance to wrestle with. And then even guys that like that are got the chance to go to TNA, make a name for themselves and around Ontario. Like Cody Deaner was one that early on, I thought was really cool. That was one of the matches that when I was younger, I thought was like that next cool step for me. And then I mean, obviously more recently in deathmatch wrestling, everything that deathmatch has afforded me, the Crazy Eight tournament, recently going to the States to defend the Canadian Deathmatch Championship internationally. Like those are all moments that stand out to me, and as a fan, are really cool to me. Like I've gotten the chance to wrestle Madman Pondo, and that's a huge one as far as I'm concerned in the deathmatch scene. He's a pioneer, and the chance to wrestle him was great.
So obviously, very long career, lots of highlights, lots of, matches that you've held, but is there anything that's still immediately on the bucket list? Opponents that you just want to wrestle, destinations, maybe more specifically in the States that you would love to go to? Like, where would you like to see wrestling take you next while you continue to do this?
So I was speaking to my girlfriend about this the other day because I do lay out goals. A lot of times, as far as wrestlers, I'll give you the same answer for wrestlers that I give everybody is, do I got a bucket list of wrestlers I want to wrestle? Absolutely. Are there names out there? Absolutely. But I don't really advertise them because I don't want to manifest them that way. I love wrestling to the sense where I only want to do it if it makes sense. And if I want to get to that wrestler, I got to find a way for it to make sense, and I'm going to do that in a fashion that surprises everybody, hopefully. But as far as destinations, like yeah, I want to go overseas. I'd love to go over to Scotland or over like to England, anywhere in the UK to wrestle over there. I would love the chance to do that. I mean, everybody obviously wants to go to Japan. That would be great. And there's a lot of people I've seen from the deathmatch scene go that way, and I would love to earn that opportunity.
Okay, so let's step outside of the ring a little bit. What are some of your other interests and hobbies? You had mentioned you were making music previously. Is that something that you're still doing? Is there other pastimes that you like to gravitate to when you are stepping away from wrestling?
So yeah, early on up until, my mid 20s, I did make rap music. I was part of a group called Academy. And then before that, I was with a group called Dub City. And, I made music as far back as my teen years. And then, like I said, into my early 20s. And again, afforded some great opportunities through music. I've gotten to perform at the Gathering of the Juggalos and, perform on those same festivals with guys like ICP, guys like Ice Cube, just all different genre, all different genres of music. and the opportunity to do things like that back in like in my hometown of Windsor, got the chance to open for D12.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so like minus Eminem. I don't want to blow smoke. So
Even
minus
still.
Eminem because I Canada trips back then probably weren't on the agenda for him. But I've been lucky to get a lot of opportunities, even like I said when I did music. And then outside of that, like I like I like regular people stuff too. Like I like to go camping. I like to hang out with my family. I like to play video games. I get into graphics design. I do that on the side, which is like 'cause I make all my own merch and all that. I make all my own graphics. So like I've always, gravitated to that, like some art stuff. So, just anything. Like I love art. Like I love graphics design. I love making music. I love professional wrestling. Like any kind of art I can get into. Like I'll do regular work for a 9 to 5, but after that, like give me art.
Is there a particular design, a particular shirt that you made that really stood out as just like one of your absolute favorites? You're so glad that wrestling afforded you the opportunity to create this thing and manifest it into reality?
Well, one of the current ones I've worn in a few recent death matches is my Smoke U, which is similar to the Funk U Terry Funk design, which I absolutely love. I think it's such a cool tribute design. But I mean, other than that, like I got to go with the crowd favorite, which is my Baked by the Bell T-shirt. It's a complete ripoff of Saved by the Bell, and a lot of people think it's funny. It's a nice throwback for people my age. It's a real timepiece. So like it's the essence of PD Skillz. It's a timepiece. So that's the one as simple as it is, I love it.
I was kind of hoping you would say that one because, yeah, that's my generation too. I grew up on Saved by the Bell. First time I saw that one, I was like, I don't care what his persona is, that shirt is a winning one. I love
Yeah,
it.
it is. It is too. Like you could take the PD Skills is off of it, and people would just buy that as a regular shirt. And that's sometimes those are the best shirts, the ones that like you don't have to know they're wrestling, like they're just funny or they're just cool.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, like, yeah, there is a market for it, wrestling or not. If it's Saved by the Bell related, people are going to be interested.
Yeah, like I've got shirts that are like my Catches Catch Cannabis brand, like which is a playoff Catches Catch can like, and there's people who buy that. Like I don't even put the name PD Skills on it. I just put it as its own brand. And like I've had someone who bought it like because like, oh, I want to wear that when I go to like my jujitsu classes.
Yeah, that just, I mean, it's got a transferable like market for it for sure.
Yeah.
Take me back into the ring here for a minute before we sign out, though. If you had an opportunity to talk to a young performer who is on the fence or just starting out on their wrestling journey, what advice would you give them that you would have probably benefited from if you had maybe heard it earlier in your career?
Uh, don't be shy. Run the crowd. The like understand why you're there. There's a lot of people that are too afraid to make mistakes, and because of that, they don't take the time to have the moments because they're too afraid to make a mistake. They're too worried about memorizing 100 moves. Don't worry about 100 moves. Worry about 4 or 5 moments. If you give them those moments, the rest doesn't matter. So just don't sweat it. Just go out there and be yourself. Like, because they're gonna remember that more. If you're a character and your natural character shines through and you make a connection with them, that's what they're gonna care the most about. So like, focus on that. Like, don't be shy. Be out there. Put yourself out there.
I'm glad that you mentioned crowd because I do want to ask. You have had a full gamut of heel, face, cannabis, boy band, a little bit of everything. Are there any particularly standout crowd interaction moments where you got a compliment you weren't expecting, or perhaps somebody was just completely thrown aback by you in ring versus in person, or like, is there anything that stands out from a crowd interaction standpoint?
I mean, I do like I've had times where like I've had friends from back in the day, their parents have come to shows, and because like I try to be pretty reserved, pretty respectful. Like when I was a kid, if I'm at somebody's house, like I'd be generally quiet. Like I'd have a conversation with parents and be nice and all that. But then like they come to a show, if they come to a show where I'm maybe a little more on the violent side, they're like, I had no idea that there was a psychopath in my house this whole time. So I have had, those kind of interactions, but honestly, for the most part, like a compliment I get more recently is that nothing I do is not believable or far-fetched. It's all within the realm of, of Tim Gagno, of the Tim Gagno, the person. Like everything I do as PD Skillz is just a certain element of me, you know, turned up on 10. Like, yeah, do I love pro wrestling and do I love hardcore wrestling? Yeah, turn that up on 10. You've got the deathmatch wrestler PD Skillz. Do I like being a little silly with the boys sometimes? Hell yeah. So, turn that up on 10 with Airstrike XL. And, we get a little silly throwing on the matching dress shirts and all that. But when we get in the ring, it's still business. But, I've got that, that funny side to me. So I like, as long as I'm being myself when I'm out there and feeding off the crowd, like whatever, whether it's to be a heel or a face, it's my job to put that energy out there and then see how they react to it and then just bounce it back and forth, however that lands.
That's amazing. I know for me personally, I saw you at what was it, New Frontier event, and you were such a nice guy. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is not the same guy who yesterday was taking a paint roller to his friend and bleeding all over the ring at PWO. It was just such a juxtaposition between what I saw one day and the next.
Yeah, I saw and that's sometimes that is the thing too. Like I work in insurance in my regular life, right? So like I get people at work that they're like, "Hey, like I heard this about you and I saw this picture," and they're just mind blown because they're like, this is what you do on the weekend. And then vice versa when I go to wrestling and somebody's talking about something and I overhear it and I interject because it's insurance related. They're like, what? You work in insurance? I'm like, yeah, like Monday through Friday, risk management, and Friday night through Sunday, full risk.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So before we sign out, can I just get you to let people know once again who you are and where they can find you online if they want to drop you a follow and keep up to date with what events you got coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. Those who don't already know who I am the first and current Canadian Deathmatch champion, PD Skillz. The PD stands for pretty dope. You can find me on any social media outlet except TikTok. I haven't gotten with the times on that, but the tag is at PD Skillz Show on everything. I keep it nice and simple, no fancy numbers or letters. PD Skillz Show. You can find me there. You can find pictures of all my merchandise. Drop me a DM, place an order, a message, whatever the case may be.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk today. And I can't wait to hear what the boys have to say.
Thank you for tuning in to Independent Wrestling Profiles. Please help out the show if you can with a like, subscription, or review. We'll see you next time.